All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. It's Monday. We're going to go around the horn. Not a lot of big surprise here, but Bijan Robinson this morning had a press conference and has announced that he will be foregoing his senior year at Texas so he can enter into the NFL draft. Bijan Robinson had a really awesome career at Texas. What's interesting to me about him is he had a really good career at Texas, but I feel like he was way underutilized at Texas from the very beginning. He didn't really play that much at all his freshman year, and then he went into a bowl game against Colorado and absolutely ran wild. And I know, Colorado's not a great team or anything. They were decent that year. They were in a bowl game. So I think, the story of Bijan Robinson at Texas is obviously one of a lot of success, but I think both Tom Herman and Steve Sarkisian could look back on the way they chose to utilize Bijan Robinson and could probably say to themselves, we didn't use Bijan Robinson enough. I've seen all kinds of stuff about him being a top 10 pick, maybe even a top 5 pick. I don't know about that. I think he's super talented. I think running back is just a position that in the NFL just doesn't carry the same weight as it did 10, 15 years ago. There's a lot of guys that just say absolutely don't take a running back in the first round. I don't care how good he is. And I think there's a lot of merit to that argument. Good offensive line makes an average, maybe not an average, but an average NFL back. A good offensive line can make an average NFL back look pretty solid. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where Bijan ends up. Again, Bijan Robinson announced this morning that he will forego his senior season to enter into the NFL draft. Again, no big surprise whatsoever about that. Little Texas recruiting news. Texas had their last big recruiting weekend before the early signing period. We're now in a dead period, which means coaches are not allowed to contact players. So this last weekend of recruiting and being able to talk to players is obviously a pretty big deal, especially when you're talking about guys that are planning on signing during the early period. Early period is this Wednesday through Friday, so the 21st through the 23rd of December. Just a couple of notes. We talked last week about who all was going to be there. And just a couple of notes regarding Texas recruiting. Dylan Spencer is a 4-star defensive lineman out of Houston. Has been committed to Texas for a while. It looks like he took an official visit to Tech over this weekend, and it looks like that's where he's going to end up. And I think Dylan Spencer was one of those guys that projected as an inside guy, but still kind of had the body of an outside guy. So I think he was going to be a project either way. He also went on a recruiting visit to Houston the weekend before, so I think he's been looking around for a while. It's probably one of those things where the Texas staff just kind of had a conversation with him and said, hey, man, you might want to look somewhere else. I don't know that, obviously, but it seems odd that he would have been committed for so long and then all of a sudden on his own just decide, I don't really want to be at Texas. So he still hasn't officially decommitted to Texas, but he's been crystal balled to Texas Tech since this weekend. Again, like a project type of guy. He projects to be more of an inside guy, but he doesn't have that size yet. I think he only weighs 225 or 230 pounds, so maybe 250. Either way, long way to go for an inside guy at Division I football. I think the other big news for Texas recruiting this weekend, just outside of the guys they were able to bring in to visit before the dead period, DeAndre Moore Jr., a 4-star wide receiver out of California. He's been committed to Louisville for a while. He actually had a visit planned to Louisville this weekend and decided to skip out on that, come to Texas. They're now crystal balling him to Texas. It looks like he's going to wind up at Texas. Wide receiver, obviously, can be huge impact, and he could be one of those guys that could be a big impact. Texas already bringing in Jonte Cook, who's a really good guy, really good wide receiver. And then I don't know if you folks saw the Texas State Championship games this weekend, but Trey Wisner, who I thought was just a running back, if you look at most of his highlights, he's lining up in the backfield and running the ball. Good Lord. He lined up in the slot a few times in that game Saturday and had some really big plays, 60-yard touchdown reception. He's got elite speed. I don't know if it's elite high school speed for sure. I don't know if it's like elite speed. Like, I don't know if he's like a 10-1 guy or anything crazy like that, but he can run. And so to bring in him and Jonte Cook off that same team, those are both guys. I think Trey Wisner probably ends up in like a Keelan Robinson type role where he's doing a lot of motion, taking a lot of jet sweeps, can still line up in the backfield and carry the ball if they need him to. And again, can line up and slot and go catch some passes. So I'm really excited about him. He's a 3-star, and I don't know why. I think I'm obviously not a professional talent evaluator, but to me, he looked every bit as explosive and had good hands, and everything that you are talking about with Jonte Cook, I felt like Trey Wisner had. So obviously, that was just one game and a little bit of film that I've seen on him. But anyway, so there's your Texas recruiting news. There's some other guys that were in town that still have yet to make a decision. A couple of those guys are announcing, I believe it's January 7th in the All-American Bowl. Used to be the U.S. Army Bowl. It's for those of you that don't know, you should know if you like recruiting. It's just an all-star game. It's one of the original all-star games for high school players and they play it every January. A lot of players choose to wait until then to make their decisions and then go ahead and sign in February. So I don't know. We'll see how all that goes. There's really not a whole lot of news coming out this weekend from that recruiting trip, recruiting visits. Again, a lot of the guys that were there are guys that are already committed. So, but big news on DeAndre Moore. I think he'll be able to come in and help. Texas volleyball wins the national championship. I think it's their first one in 10 years, and they've been to the final, I think, 6 times in the last 10 years. Not a huge volleyball guy, obviously, but that's pretty cool that those Lady Longhorns went and won the national championship. I want to say they played in the final last year, or maybe they definitely made the Final Four last year. I can't remember if they made the final. They only lost one match all season, and I have no idea how this rates with like dominating teams of all time. And so this could be commonplace in college volleyball. I don't know. They only lost one match all season. I believe it was to Iowa State, a conference matchup. They only dropped one set in the Final Four altogether. They lost the first set they played, won every set after that, 6 straight sets. And I think they were ranked number 1 most of the season. So like a pretty dominating type season for the Texas volleyball team. Congratulations to those ladies. Congratulations to the coach, the families, all that good stuff. Another national championship for the University of Texas. Texas basketball. Texas basketball had a game against Stanford over the weekend. One of those Pac-12, Big 12, some type of deal, challenge type deals. Started off not looking real good for the Horns. They got behind, and Stanford was making some shots and controlling the game. Texas ended up winning the game 72-62. I watched most of the game. We had the Cowboys on. Bless my wife's heart. We had the Cowboys on. They broke her heart. But we had that game on the big screen with the sound, and I was just kind of watching the Texas game off to the side. I don't really have a lot of things to say about the game. They won by 10. They looked bad at points. They looked really good at points. It's a really veteran team from an experience perspective, most of the time they play like it. Sometimes they don't. I think the biggest news with Texas basketball right now is there's still no news out of Austin about Chris Beard. I talked a little bit in the podcast at the end of last week about just what that could mean. And I think there's a lot of different scenarios. I think it could be that his fiance tried to go after him and he restrained her, and she basically inflicted all those wounds on herself just trying to get away from him or trying to continue to get at him. I don't know. It's really weird. Texas had a clause in his contract that says we can fire you if you get charged, not convicted, charged with any felony charge. So certainly from a contractual perspective, they could have let him go early Monday morning. We're 7 days past this whole incident, and we have heard nothing since last Monday. The arrest affidavit doesn't have a lot of information. It has her story. It has the notes from the police saying, yes, we see bruising. Yes, we see scratches. Yes, we see cuts, whatever. Just her physical wounds from whatever incident took place. And then there was a brief bit in that arrest affidavit about Chris Beard just mentioning that he wasn't the aggressor, and he has audio that proves it. Other than that, we haven't heard shit. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to go down with that. It's obviously going to go one of two ways. To me, it's just really interesting that the University of Texas hasn't just fired him yet. I feel like if they didn't know something that makes this a favorable situation for Chris Beard or makes the outcome favorable for Chris Beard, I don't know why they wouldn't fire him. They don't have to worry about any legalities. It's literally written in the contract. There's literally a clause that says, don't do stupid shit and get felony charges and you can work here. Or if you do, you can't work here anymore. So, I don't know. There's been tons of speculation on message boards. You could literally talk about this and discuss this from multiple angles for hours. I don't really know. I'm still in let's wait and see mode, I guess. I'll still stick with what I said, early on in this whole deal. I just find it hard to believe that Chris Beard will ever coach at the University of Texas again. And I think I've said this too. I think the only way that happens is if she comes out and says, I made this whole thing up. I was trying to attack him. He restrained me, and I hurt myself just trying to continue to get at him or trying to get away from him. He didn't throw me off the bed. He didn't smack my glasses off my face, anything like that. But I think anything short of that, he's not at Texas anymore. I think here's the thing that nobody's really talking about with this whole situation is the players, the team. How rough would that have been for those guys to wake up Monday and see that their coach had been arrested for assault with strangulation of a household member? And now they've played two games since then. They really don't know. I doubt they know any more than the public knows. It's a really sensitive situation. You don't take a chance on putting information out there to people that might go to the public. So I don't think they know anything more than anybody else does. You've got recruits that just signed letters of intent just weeks before this incident. What must they be thinking? So a lot of uncertainty with the Texas basketball program. And again, I really feel bad for those players. A lot of those guys came here because they respected Chris Beard. They wanted to play for Chris Beard. They thought it was a good place to kind of grow up. obviously have an opportunity to make deep runs into the tournament, which they can still do that. They may just have to do it without Chris Beard. And I think the other question is, if you're looking at this from a program perspective, is what does Chris Beard not being there do to the program? He was able to come in really quickly and sort of change the culture really fast. And then he was obviously bringing in a lot of players. So I don't know. All right, we've been talking a lot about Deion Sanders lately. I've been doing videos on Deion Sanders on TikTok, talking about him a lot here on the podcast. A lot of people have really had a lot of rough stuff to say about my opinion of Deion Sanders and his abilities to go into Colorado and quickly win games and quickly turn that program around. A lot of people have had really nasty comments, but mostly it's just, you don't know football and you're a hater and stuff like that, which I'm okay with that. Those comments, I don't care. You put yourself out there and give your opinion in a public space. There's going to be people that don't agree with it and people that don't know how to have conversations. They just want to attack. So I'm cool with all that. Just on a positive note for Deion Sanders, I thought it was really cool how he addressed his player. I don't know the kid's name. I didn't even see that game at all. Apparently looked like a tight end. I've seen the clip of it. Looked like a tight end, was really wide open in overtime, and was on the receiving end of a decent enough pass, certainly a catchable pass, and really just completely screwed the pooch. Dropped the ball in the end zone. He was obviously upset, obviously really upset in the locker room. And there's video of Deion, consoling him. And I haven't seen all the video of that. So I don't know what words he spoke. I think Deion probably legitimately cares about those young men that he's coaching. I think he probably always has. Even if you think that Deion is just in it for Deion, which a lot of people do, I think there's room for you to say Deion's in it for Deion, but I think he's got to have a genuine concern for those guys, and I think he does. I don't know that other coaches don't do exactly the same thing. I've never seen it before. I've never seen a video of it before. So yeah, I think Deion has built a culture there at Jackson State, and I think those guys play for each other, play for him, obviously. But as we start to talk about, so now he's free from Jackson State. This is really the first week. He's the Colorado coach right now. No, he accepted the position on December 5th. He obviously flew out there, met his team, introduced his son, which was a controversial thing for me. Which sort of led to me starting to talk about Deion Sanders in the first place. He can't contact any recruits this week. It's a dead period. I'm sure. I don't know what the rules are on if you're a coach at one school. Are you able to have conversations with recruits for a new school that you're going to? I don't know. I'm trying to think of a time where there was a sort of a high profile hiring like this where the coach that got hired and it was announced as the head coach for Colorado with all the fanfare and all that. I'm trying to remember if that's ever happened and they stayed at their other school to coach. I'm sure it has. I just can't think of one off the top of my head. Either way, I wonder if there's like a conflict of interest or some sort of ethical thing that says, you can't, or maybe there's just a flat out rule that says, no, if you're the coach at A, you can't be recruiting for B. So I don't know what that looks like. So my assumption is that he hasn't been able to gain at least a ton of ground recruiting for this 2023 class. So they're going to get what they get. Obviously the transfer portal is something that they can utilize all the way through to next year, next football season. And then there's a late signing period. And I don't know, late signing periods in February, I don't know what the rules are between this early signing period and late signing period as far as coaching contact. But let's say he does get that month and a half, month and a week, whatever, to recruit. I'm curious what people think. I know there's this perception out there that Deion Sanders is just this amazing recruiter and that there's all these guys that are just ready to go line up and play for him. And I think if you're talking about the Jackson State level, I think that might make sense. That there's a big difference between Jackson State and the level of football that's played in that league versus Colorado and the level of football that's going to have to be played in the Pac-12. So you can get players to come to Jackson State. You can sell them on this whole we're gonna change Jackson State around because there's really not any competition recruiting wise. Deion Sanders was not really recruiting against Nick Saban at Alabama. He wasn't really recruiting against Ohio State. He wasn't really recruiting against Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, Tennessee. I mean, he wasn't recruiting against these D1 schools that he's going to have to recruit against. There's like this perception out there that Deion's just going to go out NCAA 2014 style and just be able to pull in all these players simply because he's Deion. I don't know that I agree with that. I think he's going to find recruiting a lot tougher at Colorado. Number one, Colorado. Who the hell wants to go to Colorado? They have literally not been relevant since the early 90s. They're not a blue blood. There's no tradition there of, consistent winning. I don't, and there's only so many 5-stars every year. I think there's like 35 5-stars every single year. And if you look at, the patterns over the years, a lot of those players end up at Georgia. A lot of those players end up at Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Texas A&M. I don't think Deion Sanders is going to go start winning recruiting battles against those types of schools with 5-stars and really highly rated 4-stars simply because he's Deion Sanders. I think there's a whole lot of stuff against him. And so that's why I've been talking about just these expectations people have that he's going to go win the Big 12, or excuse me, the Pac. I always want to call it the Big 12. I don't know why. There's this expectation that he's going to go win the Pac-12 like immediately. Like he's going to immediately turn around Colorado football. And I think those guys are just setting themselves up for like really bad disappointment. I don't think that's going to happen. That team is in rough shape talent-wise. A lot of that talent is leaving. He's not going to be able to bring in all these 4- and 5-star people like everybody thinks he is. If your expectation is that Deion Sanders is going to start swiping 5-stars from Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Texas, USC, Notre Dame, I think you're crazy. And again, I'm sure some people, when I cut these up and put some of them on TikTok and put some of them on YouTube, people are going to call me a hater. And I don't, whatever. You guys have my thoughts on that. But I just, I made a comment about, Deion being the next coming of Nick Saban in some of these people's eyes. Like they just, first of all, Nick Saban's one of the greatest coaches. He's one of, and probably the best coach that's ever coached in college football. And so I did a video about that, and I mentioned Nick Saban that went up on TikTok, and again, I got blasted. He's got to have talent is the commentary I got, and I absolutely agree with that. You couldn't – Nick Saban even would not be able to go to Colorado with the roster that Deion Sanders is about to inherit and have a good year. But I'm not the one that said Deion Sanders was going to have Colorado in the Pac-12 championship game next year. I'm not the one that's talking about how easy of a turnaround this is going to be because of how good Deion is as a coach. That's not me. So when people start saying he's got to have talent, and even Nick Saban didn't win with the roster he inherited, which is actually false. Nick Saban went 7-6 the first year at Alabama. He went 12-2 the second year, won an SEC championship with the roster he inherited. Granted, he had a recruiting class in between there. I haven't gone back and looked. I don't know how many of those guys in that recruiting class actually contributed at a high level to that 12-2 team. I'm sure there were some. There's always some. Across the country, there'll be freshmen that come in and contribute to their teams. I doubt it was the whole class. Nick Saban didn't have the transfer portal either, and he did it. I think the portal makes it easier. I think Deion might have some success in the portal, but again, if you look at Colorado's recruiting class, it's ranked 66th in the country. It's actually gone down since Deion became the coach or was announced as the coach. And they have 0 portal commits coming in. I just feel like you guys that are, so big, that sort of the Deion cult, the prime cult. I feel like you guys are just kind of living in like this fantasy land. Like you act like you're playing a video game and you make it seem like Deion's going to be playing a video game. I think he's going to have a hard time convincing 5-stars to go to Colorado. You've got coaches, these traditional recruiting powerhouses that are putting people in the NFL. What can Deion say? What is Deion's pitch at Colorado to a 5-star football player? Other than, hey, you could be a part of something big. Deion Sanders has only been a head coach in college football for 2 years, 2.5 years, 2.5 seasons. You think that guy's going to take 5-stars from Alabama and Ohio State and Kirby Smart at Georgia, Steve Sarkisian at Texas, Lincoln Riley at USC, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan? Come on, man. That's unrealistic. And I'm not saying he probably will land, like he probably will get some like splash commitments. But one splash commitment a year, let's say it's even 2. Let's say Deion Sanders is able to get 2 5-star players every year for the next 3 years. So by year 3, he's got 6 5-stars on his roster. He's still not going to be able to consistently recruit good enough in the middle. Those high 3-star guys, those high 4-star guys. He's not going to be able to recruit good enough at CU to build enough depth to turn that program around that quickly. I just think with the transfer portal and NIL and the college football playoff the last few years, it's only had 4 teams, and it's basically been the same 4 teams over and over and over and over again. That's a tough ceiling to crack through. And that has nothing to do with Deion. That's anybody. When's the last time a coach went to a school like Colorado and made it good, consistently good? That's a question. I don't know the answer. I think you could argue that Heupel at Tennessee, but they didn't even play for their conference championship, and I don't think they will anytime soon. That Tennessee team was really, really good because it had a lot of 4-year and 5th-year players. TCU's the same thing. A lot of 4th and 5th-year players on that team. We'll see. We'll see what he can do. I'm really interested to see what kind of class he can put together on really short notice. Because if the Coach Prime factor is a real thing and players are really going to actually care about that, he should be able to pull in a lot of portal guys. But all these really good portal guys that have jumped into the portal, they're already accounted for, most of them. So I don't know. I think it's a really tough uphill battle. I think the expectations of him don't make any sense. I think this whole idea that Coach Prime is just going to be able to come in and pull all this elite talent from all these other programs is stupid. It's bullshit. It's just not reality. All right, mailbag. What are my thoughts on the history at Michigan and the program today? Interesting question. Historically, Michigan's one of the best programs in college football. They're the leader in all-time wins. They have almost 1,000 wins as a program. 16 claimed national championships. Now, granted, every single one of those but one was before 1950. A lot of them in the 1900s, like the 1906, 7, 8, that time frame. I personally have never, and I will never count that 1997 national championship. I think 1997 Nebraska absolutely boat races 1997 Michigan. Can't prove it. It's a totally speculative opinion. I get that. I mean, you have to count it, but I don't think that season was the whole reason we went to the bowl championship series. And I think if the bowl championship series comes a year earlier, Tennessee does not have a national championship since 1948. As far as right now, I mean, you guys got the right guy. Jim Harbaugh's the man. Back-to-back Big 12 or Big 10 championships. I think he's a really good coach. He's a really good recruiter. He does it his way. He took a lot of heat at Michigan early on. He got there. They had a so-so season, and then they kind of had a season where everybody was like, "Here we go. We're going to be good." And then they fell off again for 2 more seasons, and it took them a long time to beat Ohio State. Which any of these big rivalries like that, the fan bases, the alumni, they want to beat the rival. You can almost, in some of these cases, you can almost have a season that's just not important on a national level. You're not competing for, playoffs. You're not competing for maybe even not even your conference championship. But if you beat your big rival, all seems right in the world. And I think Ohio State and Michigan is one of those type of rivalries. So he took a lot of heat from the fan base. There was even a lot of talk about they were gonna run Jim Harbaugh out of there. I think now they're sitting back and going, I'm glad we were patient. And again, it took him a while to get the players in there that he knew he needed to go win. And not only that, it's not just about individual players. It's about building depth. It's about having more than 22 guys that I can go win with. You got to have 40 guys you can go win with. 50 guys you can go win with. And I know I'm going back to Deion again, but I think that's where he's going to struggle. It's going to be hard for him to build depth. I think he's going to get some talent in there. I just don't think he's ever going to have the depth at Colorado to play for the Pac-12 championship game. Whereas Jim Harbaugh at a big school, a traditional powerhouse, a good recruiter, has built that over time. It took him a while. It took him 5-6 years to do it, but he's done it. They're back in the playoffs for the second year in a row. I think that game against TCU could be kind of interesting. I said before all the playoff rankings came out that I thought TCU didn't have a chance regardless of who they were playing in the playoff. I think if they have a chance against anybody in the playoff, it might be this Michigan team. And the only reason I say that is because this Michigan team is very old school. They're not super explosive. I think they're the type of team that if you can slow down their running game and not make mistakes offensively, you can keep them in a tight game and maybe win one at the end. They're not like they're just not like any of these explode. Like they're not a USC type of offense. They're going to go explode for 40-something points, and it's going to happen from Jump Street. If they can, if Michigan can jump out on TCU, TCU's in trouble. And I know that flies at the face of TCU's whole season. TCU's been coming back all year in games. I don't think they come back against Michigan if they get behind too much. So I think Michigan more than likely wins their first round game and plays for a national championship. I don't think they win the national championship. Even if I think Georgia is hands down the team, right? Nobody could objectively look at these four teams and tell themselves that Georgia isn't the odds-on favorite to win the national championship. But anybody can beat anybody. Out of these four teams, they're all talented teams. They've got playmakers, or they wouldn't be where they're at. But let's say Ohio State does manage to upset Georgia in the first round. I know Michigan beat the hell out of Ohio State the first game, but I've said it all season. It's hard to beat the same team twice. Even when you blow out a team the first time, it's tough to beat them again that season. So, yeah, I think Michigan, real good spot. They definitely got their guy. Historically, a really good program. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends. Check me out on my YouTube channel, Horn Takes Podcast. Matter of fact, if you're watching this on TikTok, or you check me out on TikTok, there's a link right there in my bio. You click it, it'll take you right to YouTube. You can subscribe there. It won't cost you a thing. I'm on TikTok at Horn Takes Podcast. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Give me all your questions, comments, concerns, criticisms. I love them all. Hook 'em.